Good afternoon, everybody. Hopefully we'll have, I can't see who's here, but welcome. We're starting directly at 2:30. Welcome to the Face Race Summit 22, the session 2, and this is panel 5. My name's Nicholas Dunn, and I am the Year 2 leader for the BA Textiles course at Chelsea College of Art. And on the 28th of September this year, at the beginning of the academic year, we recorded a panel discussion that I'm going to share with you today. And the panel was made up of 3 final year students, myself as the year leader for the second year students at Chelsea, Elaine Igoe, the year leader for the third years, and Sigmoni Klugi, another academic specialising in knit at Chelsea, and 2 experts from industry. And we had a conversation about the expectations of diversity within education and industry, and I'm going to share that with you now. Hopefully we'll have 5 minutes or more at the end for a Q&A. So I'm going to share my screen now. Just bear with me and play it for you. Okay, so yeah, first of all, welcome again. I'm really glad that you guys have accepted and sort of wanted to sort of speak about this interesting topic that we're going to speak about. And the topic is expectations of diversity. You know, what were your expectations of diversity going into sort of education? And then also, what are your aspirations of diversity when you go into the industry? We've got a really great lot of panelists here, and students on my right, and
Hi Nick, could you please unmute your mic, and then I think we can get the sound back.
In innovation and textiles and strategy.
Hello, my name is Xiao, and I am a footwear designer. I studied, I came to the UK in 2010 from China, and I studied 2 years at Kurt Weyners in London College of Fashion on footwear design. And then I moved on to work in Germany, then came back to the UK again, studied in the Royal College of Art between 2013 to 2015. And since then, I've been working in footwear design industry as a designer consultant for high fashion brands and global sports brands.
Introduce myself. So my name is Sigmoni Kaluji, as you might know me. So I lecture in textile design and critical practice here at Chelsea. I also have a background in textiles in knitwear. I did my BA degree in textile design at Central St Martins, then left, set my own business for a little while, and then came back to lecture. So yeah, that's me.
Hi, I'm Julia. I'm in textiles final year at Chelsea. So I firstly came here in 2013, so this is my 9th year I've been living in the UK.
Hi, I'm Omar. I'm in my 3rd year of textiles at Chelsea. My specialty interests in knitwear, and prior to this, I was studying and living in Dubai with my family before moving to London to study design.
Hi, I'm Pam. I moved to the UK since 2016, and I did my A-levels here, and now I'm doing textile design in my final year at Chelsea.
Great. Wonderful. So let's start this conversation. As Nick has already introduced, one of the first things we want to explore is, and this is directed to you three here, what were your expectations of racial diversity when you embarked on your education in design?
Shall I go first? Well, I was born here, so outside of London, so it's predominantly, I was surrounded by people predominantly white, so I didn't really have but it was still heavily white too. So I had absolutely no expectation. I think what was sad, thinking about it, it's sad that I didn't have an expectation, that I just expected it to be white, predominantly white.
I had a similar expectations that have no expectations. So I grew up in China, so that is not diverse at all. We're just all Chinese. So when I came here, I just expected to be the outsider and expected to be the non-white person in the class, in the industry. So I didn't have any expectations going into LCF or RCA. I did feel more comfortable in RCA because there's more diverse students. That was kind of not very long time ago, but back in 2010 when I was in LCF, I was the only 2 non-white students in the class, and everyone was English. So I just accepted it, thinking, that was just part of it. Yeah.
Like you did say something interesting in the sense that experience at LCF wasn't all round a positive experience, right?
Yeah, so I had a tutor at the time that I felt I am international rap, so I was trying to raise voices for international students, which is only a few of us. So I felt being kind of mistreated by my tutor at the time, and I guess it's a long time ago, isn't it? It's 10 years ago, and it's a different environment then, but I've been kind of mistreated. I felt being unfairly treated as the international students. They assumed that we don't speak English. They assumed that, they just didn't give us enough feedback, and I felt like that wasn't I didn't feel comfortable studying there, so I left LCF.
Sure.
Yeah.
Must have been a difficult decision to make, to move and change from the degree that you'd started. How did you come to make that decision, and how did you make it work for you?
I was fortunate enough to be able to get an internship in Germany. So when I was making the decision, I was kind of half in the industry. So I made a decision purely the fact that I feel like I'm not gaining anything from this degree due to I feel like the tutor wasn't like neglecting my wish to study, and also I'm not gaining much from my other English peers because they don't feel my experience and they can't share any kind of.
Sure. So the fact that there wasn't many people that could relate to what he was going through also made it quite a frustrating sort of experience. That's understandable.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, hearing from both of you and talking about the idea of expectations, I think mine was very different. I think because I was born and raised in London, my parents have a Ghanaian heritage. So I went to school, like secondary school in East London. So I had the expectation that would be very diverse when I went to do my foundation. And when I went into higher education in the arts, it wasn't, I think I was one of maybe, 10 Black students on my foundation. And on my degree, maybe one of 3 Black female girls. So it was a bit of a shock when I first started. But I think also, having that accommodation in London and still seeing my friends and things, I kind of meant I had friends that were also in other arts universities. So I was able to kind of nurture a bit of community as well. I did end up on my second year taking a year out on my degree and going to work for a designer in Ghana. And because my love of textiles definitely came from my heritage of me being Ghanaian and being British born. And I just was like, I need to take a year out just to kind of find myself. And when I ended up taking a year out working in Ghana, obviously with all Ghanaians, or even though I'm British born, it really meant that I kind of found my sense of self. So when I came back to do my degree, I was able to bring that influence into my work, regardless of the space. And I was able to find friends that were still doing creative courses and find a sense of community. So I think even though it wasn't what I had expected, I was able to navigate the experience in my own kind of way. And I kind of try to bring that back to how I lecture with students now.
Yeah, that's really interesting to see how that kind of emboldened you as well, having had that experience is really, really interesting. I'm just going to pass the question over to the students now, really. You're in education at the moment. When you started, did you have any expectations of racial diversity at the institutions that you were joining?
So when I first started my A-levels, because that college was like advertised for an international student and both British student. So when I first came, I expect them to be more diversity in the classroom, but it wasn't like that in the class. I was the only Asian girl, and I didn't get treated the same way as everyone. Then I feel like I'm different, and but.
Pam, was that the first time that you had that feeling? In the sense of experience that?
Yeah, because in Thailand I grew up in like international school and then a Thai school, so I kind of like think, okay, if it's say international school, it will be diverse, and but it wasn't until I moved here to doing my BA degree. It was completely different. I feel like I see more diversities, and I feel like I'm part of community now. Yeah.
So as I'd mentioned, I'd grown up in Dubai before moving to London, and Dubai is quite an international community. A lot of people come in and out for work and to live there, and so my schooling was quite international. I was around a lot of different cultures and people. And moving to London, a big city, I just figured it would be the same situation of diversity. But I think for me, the meaning of diversity changed a lot when I moved to London, because there are a lot of different cultures and people in Dubai, but it is very much routine. Everyone has like similar financial backing, similar jobs, similar routine. Like in my school, even though there were also different cultures, we all studied the same things and was given we'd all go out to uni. We all had the same sort of beliefs and mindset. It was more of a mental thing. Everyone had the same sort of mindset or way of thinking. So when I moved to London, there was more physical diversity in the sense of different cultures, nationalities, but I met people that had very different religious beliefs, different gender identity, sexual orientations, and just different ways of going about life, especially in our school's a great environment to meet people that might have a more alternative approach to life that I grew up with. And So for me, I expected there to be diversity, but I think what diversity meant to me changed a lot when I moved here. There was a lot of different ways to approach and to see how people were in London.
It's really interesting. Yeah.
So I grew up in China as well. And then back in China, I went to both public schools and international schools. And then none of that was diverse. It was all, like the majority was just Chinese people. And maybe one or two from Korea. And then that's it. And then when I moved to UK in 2013, so I was expecting that I would be probably the only Asian girl in the school. And then I was right. Yeah. And as the years grow, and there were more Chinese people coming in, and I see more people from different backgrounds as well. And then I also moved to Oxford to do my A-level, and that was not diverse in the tutors or in the students. So I think I didn't really have that much expectations when I go into universities. So it was more like a surprise for me. So I see there's like an increase in the diversity in the student at university right now. And I feel it's more comfortable because I can somehow relate to different people. And then learning the cultures from different people as well. And then that was the main thing I was looking for when I firstly came to UK. But after like 7 or 8 years, I finally achieved it. Yeah.
That's great.
Did anyone else can describe the positive impact of finding a space which is diverse? It almost sounds like, Umar, you were sort of searching to experience being in a space which had more diversity. You talked about, Sigmoni, the kind of different positionality as well that you've come from, and Chi, you talked about kind of being in Scotland and those experiences of diversity. When you found racial diversity, what was the impact on you?
Yeah, so I was going to say, I think it did definitely open myself up to new ways of thinking and my approach to life. Like as unfortunate as it sounds, I've never really met a queer person, been part of a queer community before moving to London. And it's definitely a lot more expansive than I thought it initially was. And getting to understand myself better in that regard was also really amazing. And like I said, just kind of ways of life, seeing that when I met other Arabs, like seeing other Arabs in London that had a sense of community or had different ways of thinking and doing things was also really interesting. So it's nice to know that, and also within our university, it's amazing because even though there's a lot of differences, we're all kind of in the same boat. It's nice to know that everyone's in the same space of wanting to be creative, wanting to maybe break the norms, maybe wanting to just have different ways of expressing themselves. And so that feels like kind of the biggest breakthrough I had with diversity, and knowing that not everything's very much the same, not everyone has the exact same way of thinking.
I think I'd like to I think it's important that we speak about our experiences as well. And I'm from London. Grew up in South London, and my experience, it's a diversity, and my experience of growing up was very, very diverse. And then when I went into education, especially sort of creative further education, at the beginning, doing things like diplomas and higher national diplomas in footwear design, it was very diverse. But the further I went onto my degree, there was, I think it was me and one other West Indian boy, and then that was it. And then going on to the Royal College, it was actually just me and Chi, and there was maybe 4 or 5 in the whole of the RCA. This was the late 90s, but it wasn't very sort of very diverse. And then you almost sort of start to look back, or there's almost like this sort of stop that you've taken that you've had, if you've had a very diverse experience growing up, you've got all this sort of stock that makes you not actually think about expectations of diversity within the people around you. It's almost like we just did not think about it.
We didn't, I think.
Yeah.
I think it became accepted of that I'm just going to be surrounded by people who are predominantly white, and most of the tutors or the tutors that I experienced were all white as well. But I'm so heartened to see so much more diversity amongst students as well as tutors now amongst institutions, and I'm really glad to see this 20 years later. So never having this conversation.
From my experience, because the past 10 years, I saw a big change, starting with my LCF experience that I wasn't feeling a part of it or being respected by the tutor. And then coming into industry, I've worked in the industry before any of the Black Lives Matters movements. And I saw such a change before and after in the industry. Like, I felt like before people would just say whatever they want in the industry to me, and now there's some kind of awareness in there, like, you know, they won't just say anything to you anymore, and then and I felt like, you know, people are going to open up a lot more, and from that aspect, and I felt more comfortable hanging out with people who have an open mind opinion. Doesn't mean, you know, previously it was like, oh, white English. If they're all surrounded by themselves, then they never expect you to, they cannot imagine what it's like to be different. But if people are now having a bit of open mind opinion, or like just accepting, like, everyone can come from different experience, and you know, that makes a welcome environment, and I feel more comfortable to talk about my experience like this.
Wow, of course.
Yeah.
He was going to say
I was going to say something similar. Like, my career started 20 years ago, and it's been predominantly surrounded by white people, and in the past few years, it definitely has changed. I've experienced racism, comments about what they expect out of me because I was Chinese, and kind of had a lot of generalization and kind of assumptions about me because I was Chinese, and what I have been told, oh yeah, we've hired you because, you know, you're Chinese, you're quiet, you work hard. Mm-hmm. And that happened early on in my career a number of times. I mean, now people are much more aware of what they're doing, exactly. What they're saying. They are recognizing our experience, as Zhao was saying, is very different to theirs. But I'm still, particularly now, in the senior level, it's predominantly white. And it is changing. And when I work in other countries, you see a slight change, and I'm glad to see it, but I can't wait over the next 5 years to see what happens too.
Yeah, it's nice that you start to sort of speak about the experience of industry. Sort of like my experience as well, sort of reflects the trajectory of my experience in education, in the sense of the junior sort of like end. You know, it was very sort of diverse. I was lucky. I know that I'm lucky to be involved in companies where at the junior level it is quite diverse. But then the more senior I got, the less and less diverse.
Yeah, I guess adding to that, I think adding back to the question that you came back to, Elaine, saying in terms of when I was in my university experience and then going to work in Ghana that was more diverse, what impact did that have on me, and how has it changed my experience now as I'm quite early in my lecturing career. Maybe I've been lecturing for the past 4 years, and I think going to Ghana and being in a space that was a lot more diverse meant and having, in a way, the guy I went to work with was almost became like a mentor. So it meant that coming back with that confidence and kind of knowing who I was, now working with students and thinking about issues to do with race and representation and things like that, I'm also always making sure that I'm implementing that within my work even though I work in a space where there are still very few Black female lecturers. If I look at my team, I'm probably the only one. And that says something, I guess. So I think that I try to, you know, with the students that I work with or even young academics that I meet, I try to always kind of support them in their work and things like that. But I think there's progress being made, but I think there's still...
It could be faster.
Yeah, but yeah, there's still changes that are, you know, coming through. You know, so...
And, you know, one of the reasons we're having this discussion today is the impact that the FACE organisation is having within education, particularly, and with the summit extending beyond that too. Obviously I'm a white academic, and I've been sort of involved in the FACE organisation as part of the associates group for a couple of years now, and just because I want to learn, really. I have seen friends from Asian backgrounds, from Black British backgrounds. I've seen them experience prejudice in their education, which was, you know, very impactful on them, but also extending into their careers as well. So it's you know, a learning process for me and the other white academics that are part of the associate groups to make change, to make positive change in the experiences that our students are having, and so that they don't all have to feel like they're the pioneers, like some of you have sort of described, having to be the one person, or feeling like it's up to you to have to kind of, you know, help others that are coming behind you, that there should be support from your white colleagues, your white tutors, to kind of remove these barriers or that might make life more difficult than it needs to be, really.
Well, I think it's really important what you said there, because it's the fact that we're having this conversation and the fact that we need to be comfortable in having a conversation about diversity and diversity expectations is a really big sort of step forward in this sense, you know, because it should be something that we speak about just the same as we speak about the need to be to design and create responsibly in you know, it's social responsibility at the end of the day, and with diversity comes a richness and a more sort of authentic outcomes, you know. So that being in mind, it will be really interesting to hear your view and your sort of aspirations on how you perceive going into industry where diversity is concerned. Are there sort of countries, cities, places you'd like to sort of like to be, or, you know, have you thought about these things?
Yeah, so I've been thinking about it a lot more recently, and I'd love to stay in London for as long as possible after I graduate. Obviously, I'm kind of trying to keep my options a bit open. I've been thinking about maybe Milan or New York, like fashion cities in that sense. But I'd love to stay in London. I'm beginning to start saving and looking into a graduate visa. But I think one thing I kind of realised now, is maybe it's specifically with London or any other immigration process, the idea of having to figure out the paperwork to stay in the country and the funds to stay in the country, because it can be really expensive. And I'm quite lucky to be in a position where I work part-time and I have family that can help me in some of those regards. But as far as diversity, it would be amazing to kind of see a bit more like leeway or support for people that want to enter London and stay and work there. Because the general consensus I kind of got is that there's always priority to British citizens or British nationals, and I guess in every country, rightfully so, but it would be amazing to see more support for people that come into London wanting to work, whether it's, you know, reducing the costs or making the paperwork less of a maze. And yeah, so that's what caught my expectation, a bit more ease with going into work in London. It should be as easy as just applying for the job and getting it. And especially if you're planning on working for a big company, which is my kind of goal, to go into more of a caring or LVMH setting, if the company does have money to kind of like support you with the funds that make it less stressful and the paperwork that makes it less stressful.
But do you have an expectation of you mentioned your one of your aspirations anyway is to work for a big sort of like a global sort of a fashion sort of organisation. Do you have any thoughts on how diverse the team would be that you're entering?
To be very honest, I haven't thought about that deeply, but I guess after this conversation, I guess the concept world, I think it should just be given that it's a diverse team. We have like a lot of very creative people from a lot of very creative backgrounds, and it would just be a waste to not make use of the fact that everyone has such a different creative story to bring. So my hope is that it becomes less of more of a selling point an alternative thing than it's just more of a given in industry these days.
Oh yeah. Well, once I graduate, I'm actually leaving my options really open. So I'm considering the America and then Germany and also London as well, or maybe even go back to China. So I actually want to look around the world and then see different levels of diversity within different countries, as like international as possible I could be, and then also just want to see different industries as well, and what's the situation in different industries, and then what are the things I could do, and then maybe I could participate in any of them. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
You look excited at the prospect of
I'm leaving my
getting into that part of your life.
Yeah.
And you see no boundaries for yourself. From what you were just saying, which is exciting and different from perhaps the experience you might have had going into industry.
Have we got any thoughts?
I feel like for me, I never thought about diversity after I graduate. But now that I'm hearing you guys saying it used to not be so diverse, but it's starting to get more diverse, I feel like I'm anxious about it and also happy about it that is going to change. So yeah, but for options of where to go, I feel like I'm quite open, like Julia as well. It doesn't have to be London, or the UK or Europe. But I want to see what options available. Yeah.
I was going to say it's exciting to see that in terms of your outlooks and thinking about your futures, that there is no fear. There shouldn't be fear anyway, but there's excitement about you walking and stepping into those spaces. And if we're looking at you guys are the future, not that we're that old, let's think about the future. Looking back at the past, like a retrospective, and we're thinking about our experiences and maybe certain challenges that we've had. And I guess being in industry and being an academic, it's nice to see that actually the things that we're considering all the time in terms of giving you guys very positive experiences, that you are taking those forward. So especially in terms of, being at Chelsea and like running interventions, as well, kind of bringing different diverse speakers and things like that, that you guys are able to have these positive experiences and that you're going to be able to remember those when you go into industry. And remembering this conversation, especially, and if things do come up or pop up, and remembering actually what your position is and that what you bring to the table. So I think in a way that is.
You want to tell us a bit more about the Textiles interventions?
That's quite exciting. So it was
say a bit more about that.
It was a project that I ran with my colleague Matthew Crowley, that's also part of the textile team. We're looking at how students are merging their theory into practice, but showing that through bringing in different practitioners from different backgrounds. So we had a lady called, someone called Lou Williams that runs the zine, Girl Zine. We also had Esther Brack that did some kind of moving image, kind of working with your body, kind of workshops, different kinds of speakers, almost to inspire the students and thinking about how they're merging their theories into practice in different kind of creative ways. But also it was specifically practitioners from different backgrounds, and that was the kind of key thing, that they were able to bring their story into the work and inspire students from different perspectives.
Different in the sense of diverse backgrounds.
Different diverse backgrounds from different kind of lived experiences. Because sometimes, you bring that into institution space, but you also want to see how other people are doing that in industry to inspire the students. So.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point that we should sort of like add to the questions is your experience at Chelsea and sort of like working with the educators at Chelsea How has that sort of been in terms of sort of like diversity? How do you feel?
I think the 3 years experience definitely made me more confident, because before I was really afraid to speak for myself, to express my feelings, and also to express my ideas in front of the whole public, because I was the very few Asian girls or just the only one Chinese girl. And but now in Chelsea is so diverse, and I just feel like no matter what I say, there will be someone who has like similar experience and who will understand. And then that whole thing just made me more confident, and then also made me more confident about my life choices. That's why I want to go to different countries. But before I'd be like, maybe I would just stay in London. It's my comfort zone. But now I want to jump out of it.
That's cool.
That's good.
Any thoughts, Pam?
I feel like Chelsea made me value myself more as well, because before I think I'm different, so I'm not allowed to have voice. I don't allowed to say my opinions, asking for help. But community here at Chelsea is really supportive, and there's always someone's like relatable, and like always someone's there for you. But also working with the uni, like everyone kind of respect everyone, because I work with student union as well, and I feel like they are really diverse as well, like more than what I expected them to be. Yeah.
Cool. What about you guys in the sense of your expectations of the academics, but also sort of like in industry, maybe the senior people in industry in terms of diversity? What did you have any expectations, and what were they? Or
I didn't have that many expectations either, because I think because my experience has been so different from yours, I thought it would be very similar in industry. And to be honest, it has been, and I know I'm talking anecdotally, and from my own experience, it has been predominantly not very diverse. And particularly now in senior, as I think we go back to what you were saying, Nick, as you went through education, it just became less diverse. And it's the same. I work with a lot of mostly senior teams now, and it's not very diverse. Even when I'm working with a team I work with a predominantly large number of global brands, and obviously global brands, you are in every country now. When I first started, it was generally European or US centric, so the minority was white. But you would expect now that all global brands are now, they're in every single country and yet their teams are predominantly white. But that is changing. I see big brands having offices I've worked with their offices in Korea or China or India, but I'd like to see more of it happening and more of their teams changing and being more diverse. But it's like
globalization needs to be balanced by
the reflection of the team,
representation.
And I think at the beginning, when we first started, we didn't have the internet. This 20 years ago, there wasn't the internet. Everything was through publications, magazines. You flew to see design places, and you bought the things that were regional. So you bought the European brands in Europe, or maybe you might have one store in New York. But now it's globalization. And we can see brands now catering for those different markets, but yet it's predominantly a white lead team not understanding the entire culture. But I do work with teams now who are making sure they're working with the locals to get the culture right, because they know how critical it is to cater to those markets. But also they're recognizing, especially after the past few years, that they need to recognize they can't dictate everything for each of these different markets. So I'm sure you've had something similar.
Yeah, I didn't have expectations coming into industry at all. I guess my confidence grew massively since I went to the RCA, because RCA was so diverse, and I had to train my voice. In RCA, you really have to speak for yourself, and that's the first time I kind of really thought about my opinion matters, and that's the first time I start kind of voicing up for myself and thinking about my identity and that I'm different from other people that I could bring on the table. And then after that, I went into the industry. That kind of just like went back to zero again. So I've been in the industry. It's just like follow what they're saying, and then the team is white, and there's not much of a respect for international background. I kind of just like followed and not having expectation. But since the new movement, especially in the past 2 years, I really feel a change. Actually, from I've never imagined this conversation could happen. Considering how I got used to it in my past experience in education and industry, I never thought, we could have this discussion thinking about that, thinking we want to build the world a little bit more diverse. And I'm so used to that. I'm so excited to hear you guys feeling excited about coming into the world, thinking about different countries. And I was thinking the same thing. If I start thinking about different cities, I'm just like, oh, these cities are like that. And then I'm quite comfortable in London. It's really nice here because everyone is different and people are open up for it. But some of the cities are like this,
I think it's a really good point to sort of like to ask this question, which is, do you think you should have expectations where diversity is concerned? Like, for instance, if you're in an interview and they ask you, have you got any more questions? Do you think that's a valid question to ask? So what do you think, Dunn?
So I think having expectations is natural. It's just a normal thing to have in any sort of train of thinking or any line of questioning. But I think it's a good thing to ask, and especially you mentioned asking questions at the end of an interview, for example. It is a big thing to ask. At the end of the day, it can probably feel very easy for you to feel a bit ostracized or a bit different if you're the only one kind of person on that team. And that it does kind of speak to maybe the tolerance of the team, the mindset of the team, how they hire people. And I think especially now this whole idea of like quotas, like you want to know if you're actually there because you are genuinely talented and not a quota, and that can be such a big thing, especially if you're someone that's non-white. I mean, I kind of say this in perspective of an Arab person, realizing that I think I'm relatively confident I might be the only Arab person on my course that I've met so far. And so I think it's just like a big thought process, someone who's an international student, the idea of when you are going into a space or you have expectations, you want to know you have a genuine talent, that you're not just a quota to fill up.
Yeah, of course. Really, really good.
Yeah. Has everyone felt that way before or worried about that idea?
Yeah, definitely. That was one of my worries as well. And I feel like even in the interview, it's really good to know that they really accept different diversity. It's just not filling up. And also, I will be working in the team as well. So honestly, I just want to know what the team vibe will be like. Is it a good environment for me to input my ideas? Will they maybe respect my ideas? It's really good to know.
I never thought I could ask this question.
I didn't even think this is possible.
No, not at all. I'm thinking maybe I'll ask that question next time.
But it's great that you touched on what a cultural shift the BLM movement was, and how that pushed a more sort of like open discussion where diversity is concerned. Have you got any thoughts about FACE and the impact of the FACE collective, as in Fashion Academics Creating Equality, how that sort of impacted these sort of like conversations?
Can I interject for a minute? Because it was sort of coming off of what the students were saying, is that, you know, recruitment practices themselves, you know, you should be being interviewed by a diverse panel, you know, so that it's immediately obvious that that is the culture of the place you're going to. So, you know, it's not just about, you know, the interviewee asking questions to make themselves feel comfortable. There should be a position from the prospective employers that they are putting that in place, so they have a responsibility as well. So it's just to kind of go off at that point, but perhaps going back to your question, Nick, I don't know if you want to speak on that.
I'm just glad that we are able to given this opportunity to say things that I never imagined I could say this, or this matter to people. You know, my experience actually, you know, means to someone else. I never thought I could share that.
Yeah, that's great. Any other thoughts?
It was interesting and great to have like this conversation as well, because after listening to everyone's opinion, I think, oh, maybe I don't know enough about diversity, that maybe I don't realize that I have that position. Like maybe I'm in that gap of not being diverse enough as well, but I didn't realize. Yeah, I feel like from now on, I would just I want to know more about it, I want to research more, and I would be more brave to ask the industry when I go have an interview for a job in the future as well. Like, what is your guys' vision about it, and how open that company are with diversity?
I think it's a really important thing to ask. And when I think about sort of the experiences that I've had sort of with sort of like human resources and going into situations where I've just clearly thought about the position, you know, what I'm going to be working on, as in when I'm going into a creative company. These have been the things that have been at the forefront of my mind: the position, the actual job, what I'm going to be designing, and then the diversity. I don't know if it's sort of like the whole London armour, let's say. I've never really sort of like thought about it being a hindrance, being in any sort of situation. But then getting into a situation where you're sort of the HR department, and this actually happens. The HR department brought, on my first day, the only other black member of the company down to greet me on the day to go in, and it was like a stark, you know, it was very odd. And then that sort of tallied into that experience of being in that certain company for a couple of years. It wasn't very diverse at all, and their approach to diversity was very clumsy. So it is a very important sort of thing to sort of to think about, and again, I'm like, as a member of the panel, I'm really excited to be able to have these conversations.
I wanted to bring up a point which you've mentioned to me before, Nick, and sort of in some of your concerns that students voiced about, you know, am I just here to kind of fill up a quota, that sort of imposter syndrome? And yeah, just wondering, you know, everybody feels imposter syndrome at some point, but, you know, no one should be experiencing that because of their ethnicity. I just, wondered if that's something you've heard about or that you kind of recognise, or in relation to sort of being in a minoritized position.
I think it's just something I always figured happened. I mean, parents, for example, they've worked in corporate jobs for a long time, so they've always been the one to tell me about how the office works, how quotas work, like diversity hires. And I remember, and it feels really silly looking back now, but when I was applying for St. Martin's, it was just so competitive to the point that there was like this whole conspiracy theory about how they're running out the quota. They're like, we're going to take X amount of English students, X amount of international, X amount of like Black people or Asian people, for example. And so that's kind of where it all started, especially with arts unis. They are a great space to incubate ideas and diversity, but it is an institution at the end of the day, and there's that level of like, they think about who they take on and why they're taking on people. So I guess that's where it comes from to an extent as well.
There's, that systemic racism which is behind all of those kind of those theories of how people are recruited onto courses, but it's there, isn't it? It is there. It's undeniable. It's already making people make choices about where they're going to apply, which is and that's when we're talking about going up through the levels of education to industry. If it's happening before students even apply, then that's impacting then, isn't it? The diversity of different cohorts. Joining UAL quite recently, it was quite interesting actually to see that the course isn't more diverse. I had sort of thought that it would be more diverse than working at a regional university, and I didn't find that was the case. So, it's really interesting.
I mean, I don't know if she can elaborate on this, but a friend of mine, Scottish, we were talking about universities in Scotland and art schools in Scotland and how Scottish nationals usually get their education for free. And so the quota kind of plays a big role in how many Scottish students they'll accept over international students, so on. So I guess sometimes it's speculative, but it is clear that sometimes it is a big part of how they accept students based on fees and their nationality and so on.
Yeah, when I was studying, it was local students first, more than anything else, because that was the whole point of their education system, was for the people there. So, but that was a while ago. I don't know what it is now. Yeah. So,
just touch on your point you mentioned about, I'm going to be off topic, imposter syndrome, and obviously being in a space where you are of the minority and how that kind of changes and how you navigate that. And I think that is important or just maybe I'm touching on the fact that we all come from different positionalities, right? All of our lived experiences are very different in how we navigate space. And I think I listened to a podcast recently that imposter syndrome can also be there to push you. And I think it's important. It can be important. Maybe coming from my experience, if you are of the minority, finding a sense of community, or having, obviously, for instance, Nick, you're a member of FACE, and having, organisations that are like that to support you, or students, because we've had lectures from FACE and different things on our course, but they're there to guide you, but also have that support. So if you are, of the minority in that space, that you have that confidence to then come into your own, because there's other outlets or other things you can connect to. But I think in a way it can also be a good thing. And naturally, imposter syndrome, because I was listening to something that we're not all good at something in the beginning, right? You always have to learn and put yourself in a space of uncomfortability in order to grow. It's the only way that we do grow as creative people. So using that as a tool when you are in a space where you can't see yourselves, and obviously from our experiences on this side, we have, we're three different women that have navigated, the spaces in very different ways, but we've got there from all our different positions. So I think that it shows that it is it's possible, and we've learned from it in many ways. Yeah.
So just to add up to your point, like from my experience, I come to this country from China. I was completely different. I had to adapt to the British culture, have to adapt to the British, way of behaving, learning what do you do at work, what do you do after work. I have to learn all of this. It's a part of me kind of adapting myself to this society, but in the same time, there are people who are just assume that I can hang out with them because I made a big effort to make them feel comfortable to hang out with me. And there are people who are more interested in me. I'm naturally drawn to these people. There are people who are asking me questions about my background, so I'm naturally just more friends with them. And then the other people who are just assume I'm like them, then I'm just like, I'm making an effort here. But in London, it's really nice being here because we're kind of all different, and people are just naturally more interested in you, of what your background is, and that's what made me really love living here.
Yeah, it's so good to hear. I think we're sort of like coming to a sort of like natural sort of close of the formal conversation. I'm sure we'll go off and have lunch and sort of carry on. But I guess it'll be nice to sort of end on the note of just to thank you for having what is a very unique conversation, sitting down and discussing expectations of such a topic of diversity, and I hope that it's the beginning of many. I know that we're as a sort of team at Chelsea gonna push for more spaces and opportunity to have discussions like this. And I suppose one more closing question is, do you think that's a good idea to have more conversations like this? Yeah. Okay. So how should we end it? Should we just sort of like a pause? We have a few minutes for questions. Any questions of what you've seen? Very powerful. Thanks, Zhao. Zhao's I'm taking it's Zhao Jing, who's was a panel member. I could ask the panel members if they've got any thoughts. Sigmoni really enjoyed being part of the panel. Yeah, I've really enjoyed it myself as well.
I just wanted to thank our panelists again, Nick. I'm afraid I can't have my camera on at the moment, but I think recording that discussion and the discussions, as Nick said, kind of before and afterwards, was, incredibly powerful, and really sort of appreciated the honesty and the openness of the conversation that day. And so thank you particularly to the students for being part of that, but also Zhao and Chi too, and Simone.
Yeah, I'd like to echo that. It really did feel like a really unique opportunity, but the beginning of something, in terms of having a really sort of open conversation about expectations where diversity is concerned. And I think that's something that came out from the actual panel discussion, and it was a really important fact that I think we should start to have expectations around this and voice them. So again, like Elaine says, I'd really like to thank the panel members for taking part and trusting us, and I'd like to thank FACE for giving us the platform and the opportunity to start to spearhead conversations like this. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the summit. So thank you. I'll leave it at that.
I just wanted to say a few words. I'm literally at the Face Summit now. I've just come upstairs to a corner to find some space to speak. But yeah, it was great being part of the talk, and also I think for the students, obviously discussing their expectations on diversity and how they feel things are improving. And I think it's great that, you know, Nick, with both Nick and Elaine, kind of creating a space where we can have these kind of open conversations. And I think it's you know, it's a small step in pushing us forward, especially as, you know, being part of the Chelsea team as well. So it's all very it's encouraging. So I just wanted to mention that as well. And I hope people have taken a lot away from the conversation, and it's a step to making that kind of progress. Yeah, thought I'd add that. Thank you.
Thanks, Elaine.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Elaine.
And we'll see you. Well, I'll definitely see you at the summit. I'm at Chelsea at the moment, so I'm gonna jump on my bike and hop over to St Martin's.
Perfect.
To the summit. So
okay,
yeah.
see you soon.
See you guys.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.